Again, guys, be sure to comment on the videos, the podcasts. That's where we go and source these as a way of just continuing to make this, a conversation piece. GTX hanging out over on the YouTube, chatting out as well. Cat girls are back in this case. Now, Z Sheets writes on Final Fantasy XIV. I like when we had the cross job abilities and we were encouraged to level multiple things. I liked when the Marauder Warrior had a longer range, but a directional AoE. I liked it when the jobs didn't have roll actions. Having everything with the roll feels like you can trade it for anything else and see little to no difference is making me not want to play this game anymore. Chris, what do you think?
I mean, that's the downside, right? When we complain that one class isn't welcome in an ultimate piece of content or in a particularly hard-tuned Savage or something like that, there is this very logical solution to just give them whatever makes the other class better, or to take whatever thing in the other class better and nerf it so that they all come back in line with each other. But if you do that enough times, the classes are identical. And so, we're playing New World this week and they have different weapons as their classes. And if the musket and the bow, if one of those is considered better, if you just gave them identical skill trees and identical, range fall off and identical damage profiles, then it would purely be a cosmetic thing. You would lose something, but you could be really frustrated that it's like, well, I really like the way the bow feels, and the bow just, maybe isn't doing as well in a particular piece of content as the musket is at this time. And so that complaint is very valid, but sometimes the solution can make things worse.
Mm-hmm. Now, for me, I actually feel what they feel. I think the problem with how the system was set up in ARR is they really didn't invest in it and they didn't work to improve it. And so the solution that they chose was the only natural solution, was to just get rid of it and bring in the cross rolls, because there wasn't really choice. Like basically how the existing system was in ARR, which I liked going and leveling the other classes into the jobs, because for me, that was very Final Fantasy XI. That's actually how Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 was structured, where you would go on these things, you would do these things, and it would open up. It would, like, you've done this, and now it opens up to the job, which is going to give you way more party focus. And the classes were way more single player. Like, there was a time in Final Fantasy that you couldn't run around the open world as a black mage. You'd get melted. But if you were in a party, you would be so destructive. It was a glass cannon. And then into 2.0, they had to restructure the whole game, and we got what we got. But my frustration with it was the system they had in place for the cross class. While I remember it and miss it, it was a system of you only make the wrong choice. Like the only choice it was giving you was a choice to make a mistake. And one of the reasons is you could take weapon skills off of other classes, but because they didn't combo off of anything, they were literally useless. There was no debuff. There was no benefit at all for taking these. And so it really came into, here's the 5 skills that you need. And it became a chore, especially for newer players coming into the game. So I can understand why they went with what they went with, but I really wish that we would have seen them kind of invest, because they only also gave you the ability to choose from 2 classes like that. Like you weren't able to kind of pick from the gambit and try to build out something unique and interesting and experimental. And so we've seen that kind of process happening ever since that day. And Loyal Mango says, happy to see us. And then he goes on to say he's hoping to see cross jobs like in Final Fantasy XI when they start hitting level 100. Now, Yoshi P's confirmed that the level cap is going to 100. We don't know what's going to happen after that. But Chris, do you have any kind of speculation as to any kind of hopes or any kind of thoughts? Like, is level 100 the right time to change up that kind of progression system going forward?
It's the downside of vertical progression. New World announced that this year in Season 3, they're going to be adding an expansion that will increase the level cap. They have not increased their character level cap, just their item level cap. But any element of vertical progression, the problem is that it is by its very nature power creep. And power creep, that means that every set of levels either has to just be so magnificent that everything before it is now trash, or it has to be so minor that it's like, well, why am I even doing all this work? I'm only 10% stronger than I was before. And so like, those are your choices. So we end up with these times of slow grind, and we end up with these times of massive grind, as far as like how much power we're gaining per hour of effort or whatever. Mm-hmm. Seeing a massive combat system change would be a huge shift for an existing MMO.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine them doing it. Yoshi P's statement was, we will be going to 100, and we think that just going to 110 would feel pretty lackluster. So there is a sign that they are looking into something pretty substantial. But like, as much as WoW and 14 and Guild Wars may not look like the game they did 10 years ago for the players who were here 10 years ago, they are still within like a single margin of error of what they were compared to jumping to an all-new system, compared to jumping to something that is that drastic, hoping for something like true cross-class, not just the cross-class skills we had before, but something where you have like a true subclass or something like that. And so that's just something that, like, the only way to avoid that as an MMO is don't turn 10 years old. Like, that's the solution. The solution is don't turn 10, because as soon as you age, that's where that's going to show up.
See, for me, I would say, like, I think I would actually probably physically cry if they came out and said, we're going to have the sub job system brought in to replace the cross roll system. And even if they wanted to restrict down the sub job options to like a handful, so you're not having to balance against like, oh, I'm going to be a white mage warrior. You know, while I think that would be interesting, and what would that look like in the content? You're looking at a massive look at all the content that's already been made. And I'm going to say, like, I just don't see that happening. But if they did, I would cry. Like, that would be something so awesome to see as somebody who's an 11 veteran, as somebody who likes how New World has so much choice. And the counter argument that I always get is like, there's a meta, there's no always choice. It's like, yeah, there's always choice. Like, you can choose to worry about that, or you can choose to have fun and not stress. You know, it's like at the core of it, like, yeah, like if you want to sit here, and there is a percentage of the player base that's the vocal minority that I think absolutely has that, like, has to know the meta, and then there's everybody else who's willing to kind of challenge that meta. But that's my Final Fantasy 11 experience. Like, we would challenge the meta all the time. The meta was set, and we would change the meta by changing expectations, by trying to think how synergies between the jobs themselves could work in different ways, and how everybody else is bringing. But that's also a thing of what matchmaking gets you. Matchmaking means that there's no guarantee who gets put in your group. And if you're going to have that convenience-based feature, there's some trade-offs. And so you're going to trade off that build expectation, because imagine getting matched in with a blue mage who only had hydrogen, and you're like, okay, water, like we're here, and it's been 50 minutes and we're not even done to the first boss. This guy cannot do it. You know, but you got the unfortunate luck of the draw. And so they prevent those systems because they realize how frustrating and toxic they would be. But yeah, if they brought in a sub job system to 14, it would literally change my mind. It would be so exciting to see just what they could do. And so the restriction on it would be, in my mind, just to keep it mathematically simple, you think rock, paper, scissors, like every job like only is able to have like 2 to 3 options. Like, you restrict down the options so that each choice that you have is only going to augment something. And from a skills perspective, they do that to rework the whole skill system. Or if they were going to keep it simple, have it bring in traits. So if you would like, hey, I'm going to sub, red mage, that means it's going to, I'm going to randomly get that insta cast or something like that. So it's not anything that's just so rotationally breaking. It just ends up just kind of being a perk here and there. But and that's just an example off the top of my head. I'm sure somebody would do the math and be like, that's already broken. It's like, who knows? Like, who knows?